As both time and technology have marched on, numerous types of aircraft have been phased out of service. In addition, certain models have been pulled from service by airlines for a variety of reasons. The crippling epidemic, the effects of which were so severe that Airbus stopped manufacture of the aircraft after orders dried up, which resulted in a significant number of A380s being grounded by the few airlines that used it. Now, let's go in depth to look into the process by which the Airbus A380 is going to make a significant comeback. The Airbus A380 was the first type of aircraft to be grounded by nearly every airline in the world. During this time, many passengers refused to ride on the aircraft for an indefinite period of time. Disappointed passengers, who were huge fans of the double-decker behemoth, questioned whether or not the A380s would ever fly again, while other passengers kept the door open for the prospect that the A380s they own will one day take to the air again. Emirates Air is the main user of the A380 for long-haul flights, and among several other Airbus aircraft types, such as the A350s, and a few chosen Boeing products, such as the 787, Emirates Air is the top user of the A380. Because Emirates is so committed to the A380 as an aircraft type, and because the A380 accounts for almost 40% of the airline's fleet, the airline did not have much of an option except to continue operating its super jumbo flights. The problems with the A380 began before COVID arrived on the scene. Although it turned out to be a benefit, the enormous capacity of the airplane was nevertheless a significant obstacle to overcome. Because of its massive size, the Airbus A380 was unable to land at certain airports, rendering those airports unusable for big aircraft with extended wingspans. This limited the options that were open to airlines when they purchased the A380s for long-haul routes. Instead, some airlines opted to purchase the A350s and Boeing's 777X, both of which were built for long-haul travel, but had a lower passenger capacity and provided a lower level of luxury. Passengers have reported that the A380 is the quietest and most comfortable jet in the fleet. However, there is a possibility that the demand for passengers will be great enough to convince carriers to consider purchasing an A380. Airline companies were also obliged to contend with the issue of fuel economy. As a result, they were put in the position of having to choose between maintaining low airline ticket prices and covering their operating costs. When an organization expands, it is easier to supply services per passenger on a greater scale, as this is in line with the typical economic dynamics. The airline industry is not the suitable setting for this strategy. Many airlines favor smaller aircraft, since the efficiency per passenger does not necessarily increase with increasing aircraft size. Rather, increasing aircraft size results in an increase in the expenses of operating the aircraft. Two examples of this would be a 525C Airbus A380 and a 168 Boeing 737 MAX 8 respectively. In comparison, the smaller aircraft achieves an average of approximately 110 miles per gallon per passenger, while the larger A380 achieves approximately 74 miles per gallon per passenger. Although this statistic for large airliners is not particularly alarming, it would be preferable for airlines to be able to run them at full capacity all the time at a cost that is marginally higher. In a normal situation, this would not be a significant concern. But filling the A380 to its maximum capacity was a massive undertaking, and in the end, each strip did not make enough money to even come out ahead. The company experienced a net loss of almost $6 billion as a result of some of its A380s remaining in the air for an extended period of time, due to restrictions on international travel along the key routes where A380 aircraft were located. While Emirates' operational expenditures for their whole fleet, which included the A380s, remained the same during that time period, other airlines, such as Lufthansa, were unable to afford the luxury of being tenacious during that time. As a direct consequence of this, the level of involvement shown by passengers was significantly lower, and revenue dropped by more than 60%. It has been reported that Qatar Airlines, Qantas, and British Airways were unable to fly their A380s and were forced to keep them on the ground. Additionally, Lufthansa and Qatar Airlines have decided to withdraw their A380 services. The decision made by Emirates to halve its losses between 2021 and 2022 in exchange for an 86% rise in growth toward near profit offered some hope for the company's eventual return to profitability. The cargo transport and handling business had been booming, with A380s once again at the forefront of a resurgence in order to make up for losses from the previous year. This was done in order to make up for losses from the previous year. Emirates looks to be the only airline that believes something truly extraordinary is still possible to emerge from the A380s. This is likely due to the fact that Emirates has a more loyal customer base than any other airline. Few consumers are ready to pay more for a jet that appears to be operating at a loss in the short term. Hence, they would be more receptive to purchasing a 787 or an A350, both of which burn only one-half the amount of fuel that the A380 does. Other airlines had losses that were almost on par with Emirates, but it's possible that this isn't fully attributable to problems with the A380 market, given how much of the aviation sector was impacted by the disaster. There is a school of thought amongst experts that suggests it could be possible to develop an enhanced version of the A380 that would have greater performance in terms of its fuel efficiency. A Neo or Plus model of the A380 may be considered long overdue if they could operate their aircraft at maximum capacity, which was impossible during the epidemic and prohibited them from profiting from the A380s even after the pandemic, when more than half of Emirates A380s had to be grounded. It made sense to employ the A350s because the market had established itself to be a real competitor. The number of orders for Airbus steadily fell, while a significant number of others were cancelled. Producing the A380 was an extremely pricey endeavor. First, they were unable to manufacture an excessive number of aircraft units, and it was rumored that their factory did not have the space to accept larger aircraft in comparison to the more profitable smaller aircraft that were in demand. They spent a significant amount of money to make the aircraft as comfortable as it could possibly be, but they are unable to afford any additional upgrades to the aircraft at this time. When traveling to any location, the A380s were regarded as being incomparably superior and more pleasant. Notwithstanding this, there is still a distance that would have to be covered with the recent reversal of fortunes for the A380s. In point of fact, the recovery began in the year 2022. There have been many more A380s that have started returning to service recently, and it all started with airlines like Emirates, British Airways, and Qantas that we expected to bring back their A380s. Additionally, we have seen announcements from Lufthansa and Qatar Airways stating that they will be grounding their A380 fleets. They were eager to take more passengers to their destinations despite the limited airport capacity and poor ground handling, but they were forced to return the high-capacity aircraft because of the pent-up demand for air travel. Because of this demand, they were forced to return the aircraft. Even though it flew the A380 a total of 8,594 times in 2022, Emirates was the most active airline, but it still had to compete with other airlines, such as British Airways, for market share. There are approximately 1,000 flights on the Airbus Super Jumbo that are operated by Singapore Airlines and Qatar Airways combined. Both the Chinese and the Korean Southern Airways isn't left out of the action too, despite the fact that they haven't entirely returned the A380s but have started to utilize them in that space. It's possible that we won't see the end of the A380s unless something even more significant than COVID happens. Doha is the center of a significant number of operations, despite the fact that the majority of the activities originated in Dubai. The Kingpin, Sydney, and London Dubai have witnessed a comeback more frequently than the majority of the other sites where A380 activity had ultimately come to an end. It is encouraging to see Lufthansa revive their operations and join the long list of returnees. There may be some relief when carriers like Singapore Airways jump back in the loop as the hub and spoke model is likely to roar back. It is also encouraging to see Lufthansa join the lengthy list of returnees. The fact that the only aircraft that can compete with the A380, the 777X, is currently caught up in and battling with supply chain challenges due to the fact that Boeing is stuck in a negative cycle of their own further justifies the operation of the A380s worldwide. What are your thoughts on this attempt at a comeback? Leave a comment below and tell us what you think about it. Thanks for watching.